Health officials are trying to get a grip on an alarming outbreak of SARS.
The virus originated in mainland China.
Has spread across the country.
The disease had been festering for months in southern China.
In 2002, a coronavirus had emerged at a very similar market in southern China. It eventually reached 29 countries and killed nearly 800 people. Now, 18 years later, this coronavirus is in at least 71 countries and has already killed over 3,100 people. So what do these markets have to do with the coronavirus outbreak, and why is it happening in China?
This clip comes from a video produced by Vox Atlas. A link can be found in the description. The video makes it clear that a coronavirus beginning in China has struck the world before. The statistics cited come from March 8th. Today, there have been over 200,000 cases reported worldwide, with over 9,000 deaths. This is a rather serious situation, which has created the unique environment we're in. But it is not a situation like the Black Death of the Middle Ages. Currently, there have been over 10,000 cases, with confirmed cases in all 50 states. The video is going to explain the connection between the wet markets found in China and the coronavirus. And it's going to attempt to answer the question it posed at the end of the first clip.
A lot of the viruses that make us sick actually originate in animals. Some of the viruses that cause the flu come from birds and pigs. HIV/AIDS comes from chimpanzees. The deadly Ebola virus likely originates in bats. And in the case of the 2019 coronavirus, there's some evidence it went from a bat to a pangolin before infecting a human. While viruses are very good at jumping between species, it's rare for a deadly one to make this journey all the way to humans. That's because it would need all these hosts to encounter each other at some point. That's where the Wuhan market comes in. It's a wet market. A kind of place where live animals are slaughtered and sold for consumption. That's exactly how a virus can jump from one animal to another. If that animal then comes in contact with or is consumed by a human, the virus could potentially infect them. And if the virus then spreads to other humans, it causes an outbreak. Wet markets are scattered all over the world, but the ones in China are particularly well known because they offer a wide variety of animals, including wildlife. This is a sample menu reportedly from the market in Wuhan. These animals are from all over the world, and each one has the potential to carry its own viruses to the market. The reason all these animals are in the same market is because of a decision China's government made decades ago.
That government traces its origins back to 1949, when Mao Zedong proclaimed the People's Republic of China. The nationalist forces were forced to flee to the island of Taiwan, which is the current situation to this day. Mao emerged as the leader, forging close ties with the Soviet Union, initiated the first of several five-year plans, starting in 1953. The first one was a great success, which saw massive increases in production in coal, electricity, and a number of other areas. Agriculture, however, grew slowly. Mao hoped to capitalize on this success with the Great Leap Forward. Initially, it was met with similar success in the first couple of years, but it quickly became a massive disaster as collective farms failed to produce enough food to feed the population of China. Mass starvation was widespread. Mao lost influence. He sought to regain influence by launching the Cultural Revolution of 1966, which saw the purging of many intellectuals. This also became a huge failure and saw Mao become marginalized by the 1970s. Zhao and Li led a moderate period after Mao lost influences. Zhao had wanted to seek closer contact with the West and the rest of the world. This period would last about 5 years when both Mao and Zhao died in 1976. Moderates gained more control over the party, and from that point on, China began a period of liberalization under Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping emerged leader of the party after being purged twice under Mao over disagreements of economic policy. Deng had been in favor of economic liberalization, and he began a program known as the Four Modernizations, starting with agriculture, which saw a dramatic increase in food production starting in 1978 to 1984. And that's what the program's going to pick up.
Back in the 1970s, China was falling apart. Famine had killed more than 36 million people, and the communist regime, which controlled all food production, was failing to feed its more than 900 million people. In 1978, on the verge of collapse, the regime gave up this control and allowed private farming. While large companies increasingly dominated the production of popular foods like pork and poultry, some smaller farmers turned to catching and raising wild animals as a way to sustain themselves.
At the very beginning, it was mostly peasant household backyard operation of turtles, for example. That's how wildlife farming started to get off the ground.
And since it started to feed and sustain people, the Chinese government backed it.
So it was imperative for the government to encourage people to make a living through whatever productive activities they can find themselves in. You can lift yourself out of poverty. No matter what you are doing, that's okay.
But then in 1988, the government made a decision that changed the shape of wildlife trade in China. They enacted the Wildlife Protection Law, which designated the animals as resources owned by the state and protected people engaged in the utilization of wildlife resources.
That's one of the most devastating problems of the law, because if you designate the wildlife as a natural resource, that means it is something you can use for human benefits.
The law also encouraged the domestication and breeding of wildlife. And with that, an industry was born. Small local farms turned into industrial-sized operations. For example, this bear farm started with just 3 and eventually grew to more than 1,000 bears. Bigger populations meant greater chances that a sick animal could spread disease. Farmers were also raising a wide variety of animals, which meant more viruses on the farms. Nonetheless, these animals were funneled into the wet markets for profit. While this legal wildlife farming industry started booming, it simultaneously provided cover for an illegal wildlife industry. Endangered animals like tigers, rhinoceroses, and pangolins were trafficked into China. By the early 2000s, these markets were teeming with wild animals when the inevitable happened.
The video shows how the economic policies of Deng Xiaoping created the situation in the Wuhan market, allowing the coronavirus to develop. Deng would remain the leader of China until his retirement in 1992. It is important to note how his economic liberalism stands in stark contrast to Mao's policy immediately following the Chinese Revolution. Communist Party leaders have largely continued in Deng's tradition of economic liberalization. The outbreak of SARS in 2003 was one of its earliest tests. SARS, or Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, first appeared in 2002 in mainland China. It was officially identified in 2003. This highly infectious and sometimes fatal disease was believed to be first found in bats and spread to humans through a wet market like the ones described earlier in the video. And now, back to where the video began with
the latest on the deadly SARS virus, the worldwide death toll up again today.
China has reported more than 1,400 cases of infection nationwide.
It is what health officials have feared all along.
In 2003, the SARS outbreak was traced to a wet market here in southern China. Scientists found traces of the virus in farmed civet cats. Chinese officials quickly shut down the markets and banned wildlife farming. But just a few months after the outbreak, the Chinese government declared 54 species of wildlife animals, including civet cats, legal to farm again. By 2004, the wildlife farming industry was worth an estimated 100 billion yuan, and it exerted significant influence over the Chinese government.
Wildlife farming industry was tiny in China's gigantic GDP, but the industry has enormous lobbying capability.
It's because of this influence that the Chinese government has allowed these markets to grow over the years. In 2016, for example, the government sanctioned the farming of some endangered species like tigers and pangolins. By 2018, the wildlife industry had grown to 148 billion yuan and had developed clever marketing tactics to keep the markets around.
The industry has been promoting these wildlife animals as tonic products, as bodybuilding, as sex enhancing, and of course as disease fighting. None of the claims can hold water.
Yet these products became popular with an influential portion of China's population.
The majority of the people in China do not eat wildlife animals. Those people who consume these wildlife animals are the rich and the powerful, a small minority.
It's this minority that the Chinese government chose to favor over the safety of the rest of its population.
These parochial commercial interests of small number of wildlife eaters are hijacking China's national interest.
Soon after the coronavirus outbreak, the Chinese government shut down thousands of wet markets and temporarily banned wildlife trade again. Organizations around the world have been urging China to make the ban permanent. Chinese social media, in particular, has been flooded with petitions to ban it for good this time. In response, China is reportedly amending the wildlife protection law that encouraged wildlife farming decades ago. But unless these actions lead to a permanent ban on wildlife farming, outbreaks like this one are bound to happen again.
A quote sometimes attributed to Mark Twain is that history doesn't repeat itself, but rather that it rhymes. The lessons that can be learned from the most recent outbreak of the coronavirus illustrates this lesson, but it also illustrates the importance of studying history. The interconnectedness of decisions made over 50 years ago are having a direct impact on all of our lives right now. And this is a serious situation, but this is not a situation which one must be taking this advice.
Would you say it's time for our viewers to crack each other's heads open and feast on the goo inside? Yes, I would, Ken.
But do take this seriously. Next time we will explore why this disease is so much more serious and dangerous than the previous SARS outbreak discussed in this video.